There's something I don't get. I don't understand what's going on with Deshaun Watson, and it's crazy because they've told us this is an expedited process, right? Expedited to me, as we were talking before the show, expedited to me means like 2-3 days at tops.
Yeah.
What the heck is going on? And do you think this thing kind of is going to linger on until halfway through the preseason, Tyvis?
I can see it doing that because now we're hearing that the NFLPA wants to have a hearing because they want to be able to tell their side of the story. So if that's the case, you got to think it's going to go at least another week. So Deshaun Watson, I was thinking before hearing that it would come out maybe Thursday, right before the preseason, preseason. But now that they're doing that, I mean, it's got to go next week, right?
I mean, for me, I just don't understand. Like, I get that the Players Association wants to come in and kind of give their oral presentation.
It's about time.
Yeah, or about time. They said, well, we might want to go ahead and say something. This is from Aaron Wilson on. Is he from the NFL Network?
He works at a couple of different places.
Okay, well, he has a check mark, so I'll read his comments. NFL Players Association would like to for the designee Peter C. Harvey to conduct a hearing and appeal of Deshaun Watson disciplinary matter per league source. Whether Clark will hold one or instead rely upon written responses to make the decision remains unresolved per source. Now, Mike, do you expect to get anything different from Peter C. Harvey that you don't expect to get already?
That's the thing that is weird about this taking any amount of time, really. First of all, expedited is subjective, obviously. You said to you it's 2 or 3 days. It's just, unfortunately, as with most of these things, it's not how things work. It's not what we think it should be. It's whatever the hell they think their process should be and whatnot. But what's weird about this taking any kind of a period of time is the fact that he can't look at any new evidence. Yeah. The only evidence that he can look at is this stuff that our girl Sue has already examined thoroughly, and this is what she came up with. Really, the only thing that he can be looking at is stuff that she's already seen, and then she can try and argue with that. Or he can think about how her sentencing should have been different than, in his opinion, than it is. And then I guess he can make an adjustment there. But it's not like he's talking to new witnesses. It's not like he's looking at any kind of new evidence that she didn't see. So it's like, what really is? It took her 10 days to make her decision, really. Like once everything was done. Mm-hmm. And why would it take him longer when it's the exact same evidence? That's my question.
I look at it like this. In terms of, I just think they're just doing it for optics. Like they're like, now listen, we have to make it look like you're not completely biased on this one. So take your time. If Sue took 10 days, you at least got to take 6.
I do wonder what the union though thinks they can get by presenting in front of this. I don't get
the part that
that's another one.
I don't know. Like they got essentially already from her what they considered to be the best case scenario sentence. Now, the only place it's going to go when you have somebody who is picked by the NFL and when the NFL is the only one who are going to make this ruling in the end, the only thing they can get is worse. So it's not like they're going to come in and like put on some pageant and all of a sudden he's just going to be like, I never thought of it that way. No games. That's not going to happen.
That's why
that would be nice. That'd be crazy to hear somebody. You talk about an uproar.
He just like stands up, slow claps them. That's the best presentation I've ever seen. You are not punished at all. In fact, I'm going to give you money from last year.
That wouldn't even happen on Game of Thrones, man. I don't understand what they expect. Literally, Tyvis, from being like, you just stood in front of the other judge and poured your heart out.
Right.
You gave him all you had, right?
Uh-huh.
She gave you 6 games, and it's like, oh, that was nice of y'all. Hey, we're going to bring that right back with another dude. Why wouldn't you just say, let's go ahead and file the paperwork, let them go ahead and cancel it out, and just keep it pushing? Why wouldn't you just we both sides, I think, know where they want to go. Yeah. I just feel like they're just doing these pleasantries like for formality.
It's definitely unfortunately, this whole situation has been about optics. How does it look in the public eye? The NFLPA already made the terrible decision by putting that statement out before they even got the ruling. So to go back on there, it would look bad. So I think that's why they just let the 6 games stand, even though they should have filed that appeal on that. But they let that chance slip away. Now that we're moving on to this, it's nothing that the NFLPA really can do at this point except race to Delaware, like Brad said, and get ready to file that, because outside of that, you already didn't let the NFL just completely wipe you down this whole process.
And Mike, even with the thing about him saying run to Delaware, the way that works is, I guess that you want to definitely go to a place where there's a more liberal leaning court. And I believe Sue Robinson, and we'll ask our guest that's coming on, he'll talk about it a little bit. Sue Robinson is from Delaware, and a lot of people that she kind of worked with are in this court circuit they're trying to get it to.
Yeah.
But it's like it's a race though. Like, so basically what happens when the league hits go on the email, it's like, okay, the first person to get to where they want to go, they have the precedent. They get to have the court trial there. So obviously they want to go to the Southern District in New York. But I don't know how they're even going to get a head start on the league, because it's the league that's filing the grievance. Why would they know before them?
First of all, can we mention what a perfect system it is that we can like try and pick around and try and find a judge or a jury or a situation where we're just like, you know who I'd like to be in front of as far as a jury and a judge? Like, just that's so ridiculous that is our system. Like, that you know, I guess everything's totally equal. But I just remembered when you were talking about that and talking about how the NFL union shouldn't have put that statement out right afterwards. I just got grossed out retroactively thinking about the Haslams putting out that letter and just acting like everything was over, and I just remembered that. I guess I'd repressed it, or it got lost in the shuffle, and I was just. But they put out a thing saying, we know he regrets it. And it's like, even before the final decision was done, why did they do that?
Everybody was.
I be telling people all the time, listen, it never does you any good to say anything. I'm going to tell you right now, if I ever get in trouble, God forbid, I'm not ever talking to y'all. They'll be like, I ain't seen G. Bush in weeks. You won't see me. It's going to be some white guy out there saying, trust me, Mr. Bush, it sticks. Mr. Bush, he hangs to his innocence, and the facts will be out, and he will be vindicated by those facts.
And you're just sitting emotionlessly next to him.
Yeah, actually, no. I don't even want to see my face.
I'm about to say, I'm not even going to be in public. I'm going to go out with a ski mask on every day.
I'm in Jay's basement.
Yeah, I mean, ski mask
talk about
every
what Mike
day,
Pope done with that fence. I'll tell you, is there any, I'll say this, is there any chance that they're prolonging this to continue to negotiate? Or do you think that both sides are on scorched earth at this point and they're beyond the negotiation process?
Why would the NFL negotiate? If the ball is in their court the whole time.
Right.
What's the point? Why would we negotiate?
I think they'd like this to be over with, and I think that, I mean, yes, they do have the
Whatever
hammer.
they say it is.
I know, but they have the hammer, but when you use the hammer, then there are repercussions that come with that.
Well,
that's not, they care about public sentiment. They care about what people think, or they care about what their fans think of them, and they don't want to, as much as they are the villain, they want to not look like the villain as much as possible, and they would like to try and save some face. And if that's why I do believe that they're probably negotiating through all of this. I really do.
I don't think
you don't think
I don't, because it's all about optics. If 6 games was too light, 12 games ain't gonna be enough. Everybody wants an indefinite suspension, and if they're into optics like everybody say, then that's what they're gonna get.
But if they can avoid going to federal court over this, I think they would very much prefer that.
I would think they would too.
So if that means negotiating, even though you know that you can win, if that means negotiating, if it goes to court, you know that you can win. But if that means you can settle this now out of court and not have to deal with that and not possibly air out some owners' dirty laundry and stuff, I mean, they've got a little bit of a threat hanging over them too to wrap this up as soon as possible.
What is a great negotiation? What do you think is common?
Like, what's a fair middle ground?
Yeah.
I think that I don't know, but I'm sure that they're going to be talking about. All these owners are pissed off because the guy's not going to lose a nickel this year, or he's barely going to lose anything.
Okay,
they could hit him up for more money, slap him up with a fine. Maybe they'll say 2 more games, something like that. I think
8 games fine.
So maybe. I mean, I could see them offering that, and I could see them looking at that and taking it.
Let me offer y'all a deal. Let's make a deal here.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right.
With other people's lives, let's do it.
Let's make a deal with other people's lives in the future.
Yeah,
now,
this is so easy.
If I'm Deshaun Watson, how I'm going to phrase this is, I think the NFL wants to make him realize that, no, you're going to have to show contrition. Mm-hmm. You got to go ahead and plea bargain down and say, look, bro, I made some missteps. I'm going to get better, blah, blah, blah. That's the statement they want.
Got to go to therapy with Dr. Phil for a while.
All that. You got to sit on the couch and do all that stuff.
All right.
Now, if he says, here's what I'm going to do for you.
Let me sit up for this.
Here's what I'm going to do for you. Now, I know y'all want me, y'all mad about that contract. You're a little salty for that.
Yep.
Dan Snyder just got fined $10 million, right? Now that seemed like a lot of money because he's a billionaire. Here's what I'm gonna do. What if I say, I'm gonna give you back in a fine, the highest fine anybody's ever been fined in the history of the game, right?
Okay.
Since it's unprecedented. Judge Sue Robinson said it unprecedented, and it was egregious. I'm gonna give you, starting at $10 million, I'll give you $10 million fine. It's never been done in the league. No players association has ever got that fine. I'm gonna give you 6 to 10 million, and I'll go to 8 games.
8 and 10 million.
8
treatment,
and 10 million.
Treatment.
And the treatment and all that cool. And I'll issue a statement after it's all done, saying that I got to work on some things and basically admit to that. McNuggets, you look like you want to take that deal.
I don't know if I'm taking that deal, but I want to throw another deal at you guys.
I'm ready.
I haven't heard this been talked about yet. I kind of thought
man.
about it as you were saying this, G.
Oh, man.
What if the NFL comes back and says, we're going to give you 25 games and a $10 million fine?
Including last year?
Time served. So it's 8 games this year. 25 games would be the longest suspension ever handed out in NFL games-wise. They've never done a 25-game suspension. So the people from the outside who don't know all the details say, oh, my goodness, it's the longest suspension ever. It fits that public narrative they came down with the hammer. But it's only 8 games this year plus the fine.
So you're offering the exact same thing that he just offered, but disguised a little bit better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Wording it differently in a way that may please the public perception.
What I'm going to tell you right now, that the problem is the public perception is going to say he chose to sit out of last year's games. He didn't have to.
So here's the way they could couch that. When you are on trial, right, and you have to sit in jail, and they don't give you bail, they give you credit for time served because you sit there, you're not doing nothing. Right, so they say I'm gonna give you 12 years in federal penitentiary, but you stayed on for a year and a half. I'm gonna give you credit for 19, 18 months time served.
Okay.
I think you could, because the league could say, oh, you didn't know it, but you was already suspended back then.
Yeah.
You didn't really even know it. You thought you was getting away with that, but that really wasn't what it was.
I think the optics of that is everybody. The backlash is going to be that he chose to sit out because he didn't want to play for the Texans. It wasn't because he was punished. But I agree. I think that would be it. You're going to give him you say 25 is the longest anybody's ever been suspended, and 10 million is the most anybody's ever been fined.
Yeah.
And he got to go to.
I think it's transparent to anybody who knows even any of the facts whatsoever, obviously. I guess it doesn't hurt. It might be just, the only reason that I might not want to do that is because it's almost insulting to people to pretend like, be like, and plus, we're going to suspend you for that whole last year when you sat out voluntarily. Huh? Anybody?
See?
It feels a little bit like, cheap.
We'll ask Charles Robinson, who's coming up right now, if that might actually work for him. Can he get off on that? We'll see.
It's one of my better ideas, maybe. But Charles Robinson is joining us now from Jets camp, or at least in a hotel somewhere in the New York, New Jersey area. He's brought to us by the Gridiron Guys Hotline. Are you looking for a local roofer you can trust? Family-owned since 2003, the Gridiron Guys have grown to become Northeast Ohio's top-rated roofers. They exemplify quality work practices and are a valued resource for homeowners and offer 10-year workmanship warranties. Call 330-573-7967 today for a free estimate or roof inspection.
Gridiron Guys.
Is he in a bank?
Like, yeah, that's like he's in the Manhattan vault somewhere, bro.
What is that?
He should be happy.
That was great.
They got a Fermiel over there now.
Well, let's get Charles in here. The expert on the Deshaun Watson
Charles,
situation.
we appreciate you dropping in. This is the second time we talked, right?
Yeah, that was some serious production dollars right there. That little shot.
Nothing but the best. Nothing but the best on this show.
Now, Charles, we started off our show kind of asking a question. You know, the league says this was supposed to be an expedited thing. They give it to Harvey, and now he has the case and he's looking at it. And now the NFL Players Association is trying to say, okay, well, maybe we want to give you an oral report, not the written version. And I don't quite understand. Maybe you could break this down to us. Why the heck are they doing all these pleasantries? Like, we kind of know what Harvey wants to do. The league has been saying that they want to put the hammer down, put the gavel down on him. But now all of a sudden they're slowing it down, going through this process. Is it just for show, or are they really negotiating?
Well, I think the facts of the interesting thing is you mentioned it. The facts of the case aren't going to change, right? I mean, they've already submitted briefs the first time through. and you can't really relitigate those things once again. That's not what this part of the appeals process is about. You've moved past the litigation phase. This is, for lack of a better term here, the sentencing phase. You're trying to figure out what is the punitive damage. And I've asked this question, and I think the only answer I've gotten that makes some sense to me is this idea that if you get in front of Harvey and you go through this procedure of oral arguments, perhaps something could occur, either on the part of the NFL or with Harvey, that would open up some element of future litigation. That basically you're looking for a hanging thread to pull down the line. But I get a lot of the same sort of responses that are similar to what you're saying. Is like, why? Like, why at this point are you going to go through additional arguments when that phase is really to present anything new? It's sort of like, well, remember, A Few Good Men when Demi Moore says, "I strenuously object." Well, you can just object. You can't strenuously object.
Mm-hmm.
You get one shot at it, and just because you stand up and say it again isn't necessarily going to change the outcome.
Do you think there is a way that, neither side wins in this? So is there a punishment that the NFL doesn't get what they want and Deshaun doesn't get the one he wants? What's the common ground in there that you think is both sides can go away and the optics won't be as bad?
Yeah, what's interesting about this, I'm actually working on a story right now. I had a chance to, since Friday, I talked to 3 different sources who are involved in this in varying aspects. And just to give me a thumbnail of kind of where we're at, all the parties, how's everybody feeling coming out of last week? And then, where is this moving forward? And one said something pretty interesting to me, and I really like the way that he sort of phrased it. He said, look, we're now to the most important person in this process in terms of this collectively bargained process. Peter Harvey doesn't have to listen to anybody. I know he's Roger Goodell's designee and he has league ties and all these different things, but he said, look, he gets to decide in a way that there's no appeal. He, unlike Sue Robinson, he doesn't have to worry about something boomeranging at this stage. So he can come up with an equitable ending to this, and this is using his words, that can make both parties walk away. And really that is, at least from this particular source, he said that's where the power is at this point. You can come up with something that doesn't leave everybody happy. And he called it a zone of compromise. And he kind of said, look, it's sort of a fairy tale to have a zone of compromise where everyone's happy. He said, but at the very least, if you can reach a judgment where, sure, maybe everyone's dissatisfied, but it is a judgment that forces both sides to just say, we're walking at this point, we're going to walk away and move on. That's really where this process can still work.
Charles, 2-part question. First of all, do you agree that the only picture we have of Peter J. Harvey, it kind of looks like he's in disguise?
Yes.
Doesn't he kind of doesn't he look like he's hiding from something?
He looked like he Inspector Gadget's boss.
Doesn't he a little bit?
He definitely, I was like, okay, yeah, this looks like someone with league ties who, like if you had said like, hey, give me a sketch of a Roger Goodell designee, I would have been like, yeah, this looks like an arbitrator for the NFL.
He looks like a Guess Who character. Oh, my goodness. Okay, that's the first part of my question. The second part, I feel like part of the problem with this that we're having is that there just isn't a lot of precedent along the lines when it comes to a situation like this. And we can't make a direct comparison and say, well, he should be punished this much because of this, and he should be punished this much because based on this precedent. What do you think what precedent cases do you think they are considering and they have to take into consideration from past NFL incidents that will influence their final decision?
Well, the problem is there isn't any precedent, and that's part of what arose out of the Sue L. Robinson decision was that even she said, when you're talking about something that she termed, non-violent, she said, when you look at the precedent in those cases, it's a 3-game suspension. Now, you're asking for something completely unprecedented, which is a 1-year indefinite suspension. And she ended up applying a 6-game suspension with the precedent for that is it's the domestic violence policy in which there has been violence in those cases where there was a 6-game suspension. So what's interesting about that sort of splitting, she's not going to go, hey, the full year indefinite, but she's also not going to lean on precedent and say, hey, in other past cases where there have been like an element of a non-violent infraction, it's a 3-game suspension. I'm landing at this 6. she put in her decision. She talked about lack of fair notice. Okay. And when she said lack of fair notice, she's looking at the NFL and she's saying, you're trying to change something here in terms of your punitive outcome, what you want the suspension to be, without really giving fair notice to the individuals who it would apply to. And I think if you're Harvey, you could, if Harvey were to reduce this, he would say, okay, precedence 3 games. Even Sue Robinson says precedence 3 games. So ultimately, this is going to be reduced by 3 games. No one really expects that's going to happen. I mean, they expect it's going to go the opposite, but potentially not the full 1-year indefinite suspension. So it's the previous arbitrator, she laid it out there for everybody. She said, this is unprecedented. What you're asking for is unprecedented. What I'm doing is unprecedented in a way. And that really 3 games appears to apply here. You're trying to change it. I'm only willing to take it to this degree of 6 games. And even that precedent isn't a perfect fit. Now Peter C. Harvey has to decide whether or not he wants to move even further beyond that and set a different kind of precedent.
Yeah, Charles, I'm not sure if you saw this morning or not, but Jimmy Haslam before the meeting today was asked what they do with the appeal, and he said, quote, I'll just say we'll respect and honor the process. Should we take this information as anything new from the Browns and from the NFL owners, or is this kind of what was to be expected from their response to whatever's happening with Peter C. Harvey and the appeal?
I think he's speaking for the Browns. I haven't gotten any indication from anyone else involved that there's a definitive conclusion in terms of this part of the process. And I know we went through the Sue L. Robinson portion, and the union put out a release saying that they were going to respect that portion of the process. It obviously did not go the way that they expected. I think that everyone involved now is trying to leave every avenue on the table moving forward. The problem is, when you ask, what are those avenues, no one seems to have a really good answer. And that's why we got into this debate where when this first came down on Friday, I think the reaction was, well, hey, this could still, there could still be an injunction. So let's say this goes to the next phase. Deshaun Watson, whatever the outcome is, Deshaun Watson could still seek an injunction and be on the field in game 1, right? Like that was the initial reaction on Friday. And then as time went on and people started to kind of parse out the reality that there was not a cross appeal by Deshaun Watson and the union, it definitely felt more limited. And so finally, I just got to the point, I talked to someone literally yesterday about this. I said, give me a final answer here. Could there be an injunction? Could he play in week 1? And the literal answer was, we don't know. We don't know right now, and we won't know until we see exactly what Peter C. Harvey does, what the next option will be. So that's why you've gotten all this conflicting reporting and content providers in the sports world who are also lawyers. Even some of those arguments, I think people have to understand. The argument is, hey, it's not a winning route to go. It's not even about whether it's a winning route. Could they go that route? Yeah. Would they lose that route? Likely. But it doesn't take that route off the table just because you could potentially lose.
You know, Charles, you know, from a standpoint, I've looked at it of the NFL, and the NFL has done pretty much what the NFL does. They're very shrewd. They're calculated. They don't miss. You know, when they go for it, they go for it. And even when it don't look like, you know, they had an opportunity with Sue Robinson to kind of say, okay, 6 games. We looked like we wanted to be tough. Let's move on. But guess what they did? They went right back to it and said, nah, we're going to get what we want. In terms of the NFL Players Association, I've been a little, how should I say? I've been a little underwhelmed with the way they've gone about it. First of all, I haven't heard from anybody. I don't even know if they picked this case up or anything. Second of all, do you think it was a misstep by saying they came out and basically said, I've heard some lawyers say there was a doctrine where basically, since the NFL Players Association said that they were not going to appeal what Sue Robinson said for the 6 games, basically they admitted that they agreed with that ruling. So even if they retroactively go back and talk about Harvey's ruling, it's not going to be like he's going to be on the field week 1. It's still going to be at minimum 6 because they came out and said, hey, we agree with it.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not staying in a Holiday Inn. I'm in a Marriott, so I'll probably answer this poorly. I can give you two thoughts on that. Number one, the fact that the NFL put out an appeal, or I'm sorry, the fact that the NFL Players Association put out that statement, and I've heard people sort of say the same thing. Was that a misstep? I don't know if it was necessarily a misstep because I don't know what provoked it. I feel like something had to have provoked that behind the scenes. And this is completely speculation on my part, but I feel like that kind of thing only happens when, if you're in the union, you're sort of expecting an acceptance by both parties. And I know it felt like, hey, they're backing the league into the corner by coming out and saying this. Hey, they already know what's coming here and they're trying to apply pressure. It's still, I don't know. I felt like that statement, I thought these are all parties that have been at the negotiating table prior to this. Everyone sitting there had to have an idea of what each side would accept. And for that statement to go out, it would be shocking to me to believe that the union did not think that the NFL was just hard and fast going to end up appealing this. I have a hard time believing that. Now, I'm sorry, what was the other part of this that I wanted to bring up? Even though they put the statement out, remember, and again, I'm not a lawyer here, but this is when you start to talk to lawyers that want to do their lawyering, they'll say it's a two-part process. Okay, once the appeal happened, now there's a rendering of judgment on top of that. And they're going to say, hey, the second judgment is about the add-on. It's not about the 6 games. The 6 games is over. You accepted the 6 games. Now there's an add-on process or a subtraction process, which no one believes is going to happen. So say Peter C. Harvey comes out and says, I want to give an additional 4 games here. Again, this is talking to lawyers here. They believe there's some space for argument to go back on the initial decision and say, well, hey, maybe this add-on invalidates the whole thing. Now, I'm not saying that's a winning argument. And I know there are lawyers out there right now watching who are going to go, that's a total losing argument. It does not mean it's not a route, okay? Mm-hmm. It could still be a route that you take, and you take the L, and you're going to take the L. But it doesn't mean that you just give up. If you're not happy with the second outcome, it doesn't mean you just give up and take the L and don't fight it until eventually having to capitulate.
We were talking, Charles, just one more question for you. We were talking earlier about how it's probably a little bit, there's some negotiating probably going on right now between the Players Union and the NFL right now behind the scenes, and maybe they're trying to work this out so that they don't have to take this federal court. Do you agree that that's probably happening? And do you don't think so? Do you think? And
I don't think so.
Follow up. Do you think that the NFL wants this to go that far, or do you think they'd rather get this over with before that? He's really stuck like that. Oh my gosh.
Either he's thinking.
Great question. We always have people freeze right at the moment of answer on a great question.
The suspense was so built
that's
up.
How I like it. That's how. Yeah, exactly. I think I broke him.
Yeah, like.
That's how good my questions are, people.
I was sitting on the edge. Uh-huh.
He might really still be thinking.
Yeah, he probably is.
Are we sure he's not and just having a moment of zen, trying to find the perfect answer?
It was a profile question.
I stumped him.
I think I got an aunt that took a senior picture with that same look on.
Honestly, can we do a double exposure on him?
Yeah.
One where he's staring to the side.
I'll tell you what.
And actually, real quick, just so you guys know, we're going to have to reboot. We have just lost connection to RVR. So let's just keep talking.
No, that's probably
we lost
us.
Jay. So let's get into some training camp stories as we try and figure out how to get connection to video and graphics back.
Okay.
Right. Wait, it's back. Charles is unfrozen. We may have gotten connection back.
There we go.
Right.
That was on us, not you. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. I was like, Roger, turn my camera off.
Don't be mad at the days in. That was our fault.
Okay, what portion of my answer did you get?
We didn't get any of it. You were just about to take me to school, and then I unplugged everything.
Right. I'll just tell you this. I think if Sue Robinson had come to the table with the negotiations ended at the NFL offering a 12-game suspension and a significant monetary fine. I think if Sue Robinson had come in around 12 games, the NFL would have said, okay, we're not happy with that, but were prepared to go ahead and move. The arbitration process did what it did. I think 6 games was a total that the NFL said, no way. There's no way we're gonna stick with that. We have to move this process forward. As much as we don't like it, we're gonna have to appeal it and deal with whatever the optics are or however that makes the union feel. In terms of whether there's a negotiation going on now, I would just say no, because I think the relationship is significantly burned between the NFL and the NFLPA at this point. And that's saying something because it's two sides that built up a pretty strong relationship through the COVID years, working through a lot of really difficult issues together. And I think both sides kind of looked at each other and thought, hey, we didn't really think we could work this well together. We've had a 2-year run here where we've actually come to a lot of compromises in tight spaces, and we've done pretty well. I think all that capital's been burned in this. Wow. And it leads me to question what happened, because it can't just be, hey, they appealed the process and you're mad that they appealed the outcome. I am like, have the settlement negotiations been that bad leading up to this? And was there anything else that happened behind the scenes that led you to believe, hey, we're all just going to go ahead and trust in Sue L. Robinson? We have maybe an unspoken, quote unquote, gentleman's agreement that whatever happens here, we're going to go ahead and take this and move on. And then it didn't happen on the NFL's part. And did the union feel undermined by that? Did they feel like they were, there was a rug pull that happened at the last moment? I can't speak to whether or not that's the case. I can just tell you that there's definitely definitive hurt feelings over how that appeal ultimately came down.
I mean, they had to know that was a possibility. That was in the contract that they signed up for, and They know how the NFL behaves. So, I mean, you think that maybe something was said behind the scenes that we're unaware of, some kind of a gentleman's agreement that they broke? Is that what you're suggesting?
I can only, I mean, in my mind, as you said, everyone involved knew that an appeal was possible. Both sides knew that an appeal was possible. So it can't be, it's not like it's out of left field. Everybody knew, hey, there's a chance that, and the union clearly knew going into the process, there's a chance that the NFL could appeal this. Regardless of what the ultimate outcome is, the NFL could end up appealing this. So any sense of, I guess, lost trust between those two parties can't come just because an appeal happened. So if there's a breakdown now in that relationship, or there's like a fundamental left turn that occurred in that relationship, it leads me to believe like something else must have happened. And again, these were two parties that had talked to each other and spitballed over settlement agreements for a while. So there was an open line of communication. And if for this to feel so burned coming out of Friday, it can't just be because the league appealed. It has to be because the league appealed and it left the union feeling some kind of way that goes beyond just the fact that, hey, the league had the power to do this. Now, I can speak to at least some of that, and the NFLPA has already made that case itself, which is you keep holding players to a standard of justice that you don't hold your same owners to. You keep saying that owners have to be held to, to a high standard as well when it comes to personal conduct and how this reflects upon the league. And yet it's always the players who seem to get the most vigorous investigations, the most vigorous punishments, the precedent-setting punishments. And yet the owners, there are times where there aren't even investigations that take place. I mean, look at the Texans right now. The Texans were clearly involved in this enough to feel like they had to settle with 30 women, okay? There was clearly a situation where an NDA was provided to Deshaun Watson by the head of security by the Texans. And yet, up until now, there's been no indication of ramifications for the Texans, which just leads into a long-held belief, which is the NFL is about two things. Number one, protecting the money first, and then secondly, protecting issues that strike to the integrity of the game, which is like Miami and tampering, salary cap circumvention, deflating footballs, which could affect the on-field progress, Calvin Ridley placing a bet, things like that. That's what the NFL ultimately is. They're about protecting the money for owners and protecting the integrity of the football game.
That's Charles, the truth. Thank you so much for coming on and getting lots of great insight. We'll be checking it back with you. Hopefully this thing is over sooner than later. But we'll be checking back in with you. Appreciate you.
Charles, get you some Ohio State gear and the Cleveland Guardian hat.
Man,
Go Bucks.
See how you just slid that one in? Tyler's always trying to get something.
Thanks, Charles. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Charles.